Hello, welcome to Thor Talk, the show all about Marvel's resident god of thunder. On this episode of Thor Talk, we'll be looking at how Thor acts on the behalf of the great warrior Beowulf and caused the events that lead to the creation of Venom and other symbiotes like him. Plus, we see the origin of Gorr the God Butcher's weapon, the Necrosword, on Thor Talk.
I am Thor the Thunderer, son of Odin, prince of Asgard, and this world is under my protection.
Venom number 4 was written by Donny Cates and was published in July of 2018. Eddie Brock is currently trying to be a hero as Venom, but doing so accidentally unleashes Knull, the god of symbiotes. As Knull has ensnared Brock's symbiote, he tells him his story, which began billions of years ago. Knull dwelt in nothingness in the beginning, but then there was light, and from that light came the gods, the Celestials. These gods looked upon the domain of Knull, and they saw it as something that needed to be filled. Enraged by this, Knull reached into the abyss and pulled out a blade. He used the blade to slay a celestial god. For this act, Knull was banished to his void, but this did not stop him. He continued to work on that blade, forging it into the first ever symbiote. Knull would take this blade and use it on all manners of creation, until it earned its name, all black, the Necrosword, the God Slayer. Knull would continue to use the Necrosword on a path of death and destruction, until one day he fell, while still grappling a god in combat. There he would be found by Gorr, who would take the Necrosword for himself, and use it to butcher the gods. But eventually, Knull was able to rise once again, and he realized that he could draw strength from hosts by creating symbiotes and bonding them with living creatures. So, he gathered many symbiotes, and he controlled them, becoming their hive mind. As a huge black dragon, he rained death and destruction upon all manner of creation once again, until he came to Earth. As tyrants from far-off worlds often find, Earth is not an easy planet to conquer. It has protectors. There, Knull terrorized a Norse village, where he became known as the Grendel. As he raced for the mead hall of Hrothgar, the Geats called desperately for their hero Beowulf to rescue them. I know not of this Beowulf you pray to, but perhaps Thor will suffice! Thor unleashed such a blow of lightning that one strike was enough to defeat Knull and his Grendel, and so much more. As Knull himself says, "Your thunder god unleashed such a power as I had never felt before in all the worlds I had wrapped my horde around. And in the blink of an eye, he stabbed it like a billion needles into our hearts. We were undone." Thor's lightning cut off Knull's control over his symbiotes, so they reached out desperately for help and found new hosts. Bonding with these life forms gave the symbiotes an understanding of honor, nobility, light, and life itself. They gained independence and were able to think for themselves, no longer just an extension of Knull's will. Seeing Knull for the monster that he was, they rebelled against their god, imprisoning him. This is how they became the Klyntar. Brock is confused, as the planet that the symbiotes are from is called the Klyntar. But Knull explains there is no planet of the symbiotes. Klyntar is their word for cage, and they use that cage to imprison their god. Knull then reveals that he is taking Brock, and Miles Morales, who had tagged along earlier, to the Klyntar. Despite the fact that this is a Venom comic, it has a surprising amount of Thor references in it. We learned that the Necrosword, which Gorr used to almost wipe out all of the gods, was in fact the very first symbiote. We also learned that Thor is responsible for the symbiotes as we know them, When he attacked Knull in Viking times, he accidentally granted the symbiotes independence, which led to characters like Venom and Carnage, as they never could have existed without Thor granting them independence. Also, while Beowulf never showed up to slay the Grendel, he does exist in the Marvel Universe. It just so happened that Thor got there first. Well, that's all for this episode of Thor Talk. If you want to keep up with and support Thor Talk, simply subscribe. You can also support Thor Talk on Patreon at patreon.com/ThorTalk. Once again, I'd like to formally state that all art and video is owned by its respective companies, and I own none of it. With that said, see you next time on Thor Talk, where...
Behold